Today, let's discuss what is possibly the biggest man-made hoax in the field of biology. Darwin once called himself the devil's chaplain because, in an era dominated by the church, his theory of evolution seriously undermined people's belief in God. Christianity teaches that God created humanity. Evolution, however, claims we evolved from apes and that all living organisms share a common ancestor. The theory suggests that through continuous major mutations, life slowly evolved from fish to amphibians. Amphibians then became apes, and finally, apes gradually evolved into humans. However, Darwin himself acknowledged that a major weakness of the theory was the lack of evidence for intermediate species. If we truly evolved, we should be able to find fossils of those intermediate forms, showing the slow transition from ape to human. But at the time, that evidence was missing. That's when a German scientist named Ernst Haeckel stepped up. He published a famous illustration, the Haeckel's embryo diagram. He divided embryos into 3 stages and compared the embryos of fish, salamanders, turtles, and humans. You can see from the diagram that the embryos of all animals in the first stage, on the top row, look remarkably similar. This was then used to indirectly prove the evolutionary idea that all life shares a single ancestor. Even Darwin believed Haeckel's finding was the most powerful factual evidence to date for his theory. However, the truth was far from what it seemed. British embryologist Michael Richardson got involved because he had spent his career studying human embryos and had never once seen a human embryo go through a fish-like stage. He was determined to correct this century-old error. Being pragmatic, he knew an individual couldn't easily overturn this deeply established pseudoscience. So he teamed up with 17 scientists to study the embryos of 50 different vertebrates. Besides the fish and salamanders Haeckel had used, they also examined lampreys, tree frogs, and others. In August 1997, they finally published their comparative photos. The photographic evidence clearly showed distinct differences. That's when the public finally understood Haeckel's deception. To make the first stage pictures look similar, Haeckel deliberately deleted the nose, heart, and most internal organs, as well as the limb buds, from the human embryo. He then lengthened the spine to make it look more like the tail of other animals. He made other changes as well. For example, the chicken embryo's eye in the first stage is naturally unpigmented, unlike other animals. So Haeckel simply colored it black to make it appear more consistent with the others. Furthermore, he intentionally chose the aquatic salamander to represent amphibians instead of the frog, because the salamander looks more fish-like. Frogs, by contrast, don't look as much like fish. Actually, this major fraud wasn't a new discovery. When Haeckel was teaching at a German university, his colleagues had already exposed his fake drawings. Haeckel himself had even admitted to the forgery. For this reason, you won't find Haeckel's image in German textbooks today. However, in English and Chinese textbooks, these forged pictures have been used for over 100 years. Does this mean the theory of evolution is false? Just last year, hundreds of researchers worldwide, after studying the gene pools of 100,000 animal species, found that 90% of species, including humans, only emerged 100,000 to 200,000 years ago. Scientists theorize that a global catastrophe occurred around that time, perhaps climate cooling or another natural disaster. The most likely culprit, though, is a global, fatal virus. It's unclear whether this virus was a mutation of a terrestrial virus or came from outer space, perhaps delivered by a meteorite. It's all speculation. What is certain is that 90% of the species on Earth today were established 100,000 to 200,000 years ago, and the DNA of all species is undergoing regular neutral mutations. These mutations don't align with Darwin's concept of natural selection, where species become increasingly adapted to their changing environment. These ongoing neutral mutations neither help nor harm our survival. But don't underestimate them. Over millions or even tens of millions of years, this accumulation could one day produce a new form of human. This emergence wouldn't be the slow evolution Darwin envisioned. Instead, once a critical mass is reached, a new species is generated instantly. Therefore, the intermediate species Darwin obsessed over simply do not exist. This view, however, doesn't disprove the theory of evolution. Instead, it serves as a powerful complement to it.